I was 26 when I realized just how invisible I'd been in my own family. My name's Dax, and for most of my life, I thought being quiet, dependable, and useful would earn me love. Turns out, it just made me convenient. My older brother, Chase, was the golden child, loud, confident, and effortlessly charming. He could break a rule, ruin a car, or fail a semester, and my parents would still call him their little star. Me? I could bring home a promotion, pay off one of their loans, or fix the leaky roof, and they'd nod absently before asking if I could grab groceries on my way back. That's the kind of dynamic I grew up in, one where effort didn't matter, only spotlight did. When I got my first remote tech job, I thought things might change. Suddenly, I was earning well enough to cover my rent, my bills, and even help out at home. Mom would call about unexpected expenses, and I'd send over a few hundred. Dad would sigh about tight months, and I'd cover the difference. It wasn't pity, I wanted to help. I told myself, they raised you. This is the least you can do. But over time, those small favors turned into recurring transfers, then into entire bills. I was paying their utilities, helping with the mortgage, and even covering Chase's student loans. Somehow, I'd become the family's financial backbone, and nobody said a word of thanks. It started feeling heavy about 2 years ago, when I realized my savings weren't growing even though I earned more than enough. One night, I opened my budgeting app and stared at the numbers. Nearly 40% of my income went straight to my parents. I tried to justify it. They were getting older, things were hard, but something in me felt off. Every time I said no to dinner with friends or skipped upgrading my laptop, it wasn't because I was saving. It was because I was quietly funding my brother's latest dream. Chase had that effortless kind of privilege you can't teach. He was 28, still living at home, claiming he was finding his path. His path apparently led through half-finished side hustles, expensive vacations, and a social media feed full of designer shoes and self-care quotes. Whenever I mentioned maybe asking him to chip in at home, Mom would get defensive. He's still figuring things out. Dax, she'd say, you were always the independent one. The irony was painful. My independence was the reason they felt entitled to lean on me indefinitely. Things reached a strange tension last spring, right before his birthday. I'd been planning to cut back on how much I sent home, just to focus on my own life for once. I had a small dream of visiting Japan, something I'd talked about since college. I even started setting aside a Japan fund. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then, a week before Chase's birthday, Mom called sounding excited. We have a surprise for him, she said. I remember her voice practically buzzing. He's going to love it. I smiled, genuinely happy for once. That's great, Mom. What is it? She hesitated for just a second before saying, you'll see at the party. I didn't think much of it until that day. The living room was decorated like something out of a travel vlog. Suitcases as props, posters of Italy, tiny flags on the cake. The whole family was there, laughing, chatting, everyone pretending like this was the most natural thing in the world. Then came the big reveal. They handed Chase a glossy envelope. Inside was a fully paid trip to Italy, 2 weeks, all expenses covered. I remember his jaw dropping, Mom tearing up, Dad clapping him on the back. You've always made us proud, son, she said through her smile, hugging him. I stood there, half clapping, my mouth dry. Proud. Proud of what? When it came time for me to open my gift, I tried not to expect anything fancy. I never did. But the contrast was brutal. It was a $25 gift card to a coffee chain and a small handwritten note. Sometimes life isn't about the big things, Mom said as I unfolded it. It's about appreciating the little ones. Everyone laughed softly, like she'd said something profound. I forced a smile, my throat tight, and nodded. Thanks, I said, because what else could I say? The rest of the evening felt like a blur. I smiled in photos, laughed at jokes I didn't hear, and helped clean up after everyone left. Chase spent half the night showing off travel blogs, talking about all the amazing content he'd make abroad. He even asked me if I could help him edit the photos when he got back. I said sure. Inside, though, something had shifted, something quiet but irreversible. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in my car outside their house, engine off, watching the porch light flicker. The house I'd been helping to keep afloat for years. I thought about all the nights I stayed up late working so they wouldn't have to worry. All the plans I'd postponed. All the moments I let myself believe that loyalty would eventually be noticed. But now it was so clear. I wasn't family. I was a utility. I went home, opened my laptop, and started going through my finances. My direct deposits, my transfers, my automatic payments. And it hit me. Everything was still running through my account. I'd set it up years ago so bills wouldn't go unpaid. Electric, water, even the property tax reminders were under my name. I stared at the numbers for a long time, my finger hovering over the cancel button. I didn't do it, not yet. But the thought of it burned at the back of my mind. The next morning, I woke up to a cheerful text from Mom. "Can you help Chase get his travel insurance set up? He's not great with forms." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening, then typed back, "Sure." But my hands trembled. I realized that every time I said yes, a small part of me disappeared. Over the next few days, I found myself pulling back emotionally. I stopped answering calls immediately, delayed payments by a day, started keeping to myself. Chase noticed first. "You good, bro?" he asked casually one afternoon when I stopped by. "You've been kinda quiet." I just shrugged. "Yeah, just tired." Mom gave me that look, the one that said she didn't believe me but didn't care enough to ask. When the week after his birthday rolled around, I decided to test something. I skipped transferring the usual utility money. I wanted to see if they'd even notice, or maybe, if they'd just assume something had gone wrong with the bank. 2 days later, I got a message from Dad. "Hey, Dax, looks like the power bill didn't go through this month. Mind checking?" "No, please. No, thank you." Just the expectation that I'd fix it. I typed back, "On it." But I didn't send it. I just stared at the blinking cursor. Something inside me had gone very, very still. That weekend, I went over for dinner, and everything looked the same on the surface. Mom serving food, Chase talking about Rome, Dad half listening while scrolling on his phone. But under it all, something had changed in me. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just empty, detached, like watching a movie I'd seen too many times. And then Mom said something that pushed me over the edge. She was laughing, cutting a slice of cake, when she turned to Chase and said, "You've always made us so proud. You just have that spark. Not like some people who get lost and work all day." Chase laughed. Dad chuckled. And me? I just froze, fork halfway to my mouth. That was the moment I knew I couldn't keep pretending. That night, I packed my laptop, my clothes, and a single suitcase. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. By the time the sun rose, I was miles away, sitting in a cafe with my laptop open. My inbox was full. Work emails, family messages, bank alerts. I ignored all of them. Instead, I clicked through my financial accounts one last time. Every bill, every payment, every connection. And then, with a calmness I hadn't felt in years, I started severing them one by one. I didn't know it then, but what I did that morning would send my family spiraling within a week. And when they finally called, their voices weren't proud anymore. They were panicked. Because that was the day they realized their house, their comfort, their stability, had all been standing on me. And I was done holding it up. But that's when things started getting ugly. Real ugly. When I woke up that first morning away from home, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet. It's strange, the peace that comes when you finally stop holding everything together. I was in a tiny rental apartment 2 cities over, still half-packed, with nothing but my laptop, some clothes, and a coffee mug. I checked my phone, 6 missed calls, all from Mom. 1 text from Dad, "Call us immediately." No, "Good morning." No, "Are you okay?" Just demand disguised as concern. I didn't answer. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started working. My job had always been remote, and for once, I focused entirely on it, not juggling bills or double-checking payment reminders for a house that wasn't mine. By the afternoon, I got another message. This time from Chase. "Hey bro, you didn't pay the mortgage." "No, how are you?" No acknowledgement that I'd disappeared overnight. Just a question about money. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. "I don't live there anymore." It took him less than a minute to respond. "Wait, what? What do you mean you don't live there anymore?" "I moved out." There was a pause, and then another bubble appeared. "You can't just move out. Mom's freaking out." "You didn't even tell anyone." "I didn't think anyone would care." I typed back, then deleted it. I rewrote it softer. I needed space. Another minute passed. Then, "So, are you still handling the bills, or?" I put my phone face down. I didn't need to read the rest. That text said everything. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Some polite, some passive-aggressive, some just desperate. "Power got cut off. Dad texted one morning. Can you transfer the money for the reconnection? We'll pay you back soon. I didn't respond. They wouldn't pay me back. They never had. By the end of the week, Mom finally called while I was in a meeting. I ignored it. Then she called again. And again. After the fifth call, I stepped outside to answer. Dax, she said immediately, voice trembling like she'd just run a marathon. What is going on? Why are the bills unpaid? The water's off, the internet's gone, and your father is furious. Because I stopped paying them, I said calmly. There was silence. Then, you what? I stopped paying. It's not my responsibility anymore, Mom. Of course it is, she snapped, her tone turning sharp. You've always helped out. We rely on you. I know, I said. That's the problem. Her voice softened, shifting tactics. Sweetheart, we're a family. We help each other. Yeah, I said, bitterness creeping in. Except it's never each other, is it? It's just me. She sighed dramatically. You're being ungrateful. We did everything for you when you were young. I almost laughed. And I've been doing everything for you since I was 22. That ended the conversation. She hung up after muttering something about talking later when you're not being dramatic. I went back to my desk, my hands shaking. I wasn't angry, at least, not in the usual way. I was tired of the same emotional pattern. Guilt, deflection, and then dismissal. They'd always used it like clockwork, and I'd always fold it. But not this time. Still, the calls didn't stop. Chase tried again that night. His tone was friendlier than Mom's, but it had that same undertone of expectation. Dude, you're overreacting. You can't just leave everyone hanging. The house payments are in your name. They're in my name because no one else could get approved, I said. Remember? Yeah, but you knew that when you signed. You can't just bail. I can, I said. And I did. Wow. Real mature, he said. You always do this. You get all moody and self-righteous. And then everyone else has to pick up the pieces. That one stung. Not because it was true, but because of how familiar it sounded. Chase had always flipped things that way. Every time he messed up, I ended up cleaning it up, and he still found a way to make me the villain. I took a slow breath. Chase, I've been paying for everything for years. You've been living rent-free, eating food I paid for, driving Mom's car that I fixed, and I never once complained. Don't tell me about picking up pieces. He scoffed. You think you're better than everyone, don't you? No, I said quietly. I just finally realized I'm not worse. He didn't reply after that. The silence lasted about 2 days before Mom texted again, this time with a photo, her standing in the kitchen, next to a pile of unpaid bills. This is what you've done to us, the message read. We could lose the house. Something about the phrasing hit me. Not, we're struggling, or we need help. It was, you've done this. As if me stopping the bleeding made me responsible for the wound. I didn't answer. But that night, I sat in bed thinking about all the times I'd bailed them out. When Dad's car broke down, I paid for repairs. When Chase got a parking ticket, I covered it because Mom said it'd ruin his credit. When they wanted to remodel the kitchen, I co-signed a loan because you're the only one with a stable job. Every single time, I told myself it was temporary. But it never ended. Now that I'd finally stepped back, they were falling apart. And instead of reflecting on why, they were blaming me. A few days later, I decided to visit unannounced. I told myself it was to grab a few boxes I'd left behind. But deep down, I think I just wanted to see if things had really changed. When I walked through the front door, it was chaos. The house felt smaller, messier, louder. Mom was on the phone arguing with the utility company. Dad was pacing in the living room. And Chase was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone like nothing was wrong. When they saw me, the energy shifted instantly. Mom hung up mid-sentence and rushed over, her expression melting into practiced relief. Oh, thank goodness. I knew you'd come to your senses. I set my keys down calmly. I'm just here to grab some stuff. Her smile faltered. Dax, please. Let's talk about this like adults. Dad folded his arms. This stunt of yours isn't funny. You're acting like a child. I tilted my head. I'm acting like a child because I stopped paying your bills. You're acting like a child because you're punishing your family, he said sharply. That word, punishing, made something inside me twist. You mean holding you accountable? Mom interjected quickly. We're not the enemy here, Dax. We just need you to understand how much this family depends on you. Yeah, I said quietly. That's exactly the problem. Chase rolled his eyes. Here we go? Mr. Martyr again. I turned to him. You don't get to talk. He laughed. Oh, I don't. You think you're the only one who's had it rough. Yes, I said flatly. You are literally being sent to Italy for free while I get lectures about gratitude. Mom gasped. Don't twist this into jealousy. It's not jealousy, I said, my voice low. It's clarity. For a second, the room went still. I could see in their faces that they weren't hearing me. They were waiting for me to back down. I'd seen that look 100 times before, and it always ended the same way. I'd sigh, apologize, and fix whatever mess they were in. But not this time. I grabbed the last box from my old room, turned around, and headed for the door. Mom's voice followed me. You're really just going to walk away from your family? I stopped at the threshold, hand on the doorknob. No, I said softly. I'm walking away from being your safety net. And then I left. That should have been the end of it. But a few days later, I found out how far they were willing to go to drag me back. It started with my HR department reaching out, saying they'd received a call from someone claiming to be me, asking about my employment verification and income details. My stomach dropped. When I called back to clarify, they said, it was your mother. She said you were applying for a loan together. Except I wasn't. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. You've always helped us before, she said. We just assumed you'd still want to. You tried to take out a loan in my name, I said slowly, my voice shaking. Don't be so dramatic, she said. We were just looking into options. That was the first time in my life I hung up on my mother. By the end of that week, I'd frozen my credit, changed my banking passwords, and called my landlord to make sure no one could use my name for anything. My hands were trembling the entire time, but under the fear was something else, a cold, quiet certainty. They weren't just entitled. They were desperate. And I knew, deep down, that they weren't done. Not by a long shot. 2 weeks passed after the loan incident, and I honestly thought maybe, they'd finally gotten the message. No calls, no texts, no surprise knocks at my door. The quiet was almost eerie, but peaceful in its own way. I started sleeping better, eating better, even taking walks after work without the constant dread of another, we need to talk, message. For the first time in years, I felt like my life belonged to me again. But peace never lasts long when someone's used to living off your effort. It started subtly. One afternoon, I got an email from my landlord saying he'd received a concerned call about me, someone claiming I'd been struggling financially and might not be able to make rent. He assured me it wasn't a problem since I'd never missed a payment, but it bothered him enough to mention it. I didn't even have to ask who it was. That night, I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, her voice overly sweet, like she'd been expecting this exact call. Oh, Dax. How are you, sweetheart? We haven't heard from you in ages. I'm fine, I said evenly. Did you call my landlord? There was a tiny pause, barely a second, but I caught it. Of course not, she said. Why would I do that? I didn't respond. Unless, she continued, her tone shifting into faux concern. Maybe Chase mentioned something? You know how he worries about you. Right, I said. He worries about me. That's why he told my landlord I'm broke. The line went quiet. Then she sighed dramatically. You're overreacting again. We just wanted to make sure you're okay. I'm not your dependent, I said. You don't need to check in with my landlord, my boss, or my bank. Excuse me, she snapped. We've done nothing but support you your whole life, and this is how you talk to me? There it was again, the rewrite of reality. I'd been their crutch for years, but in her version, they were the generous ones. I ended the call before she could twist it further. Still, the paranoia lingered. I changed my passwords again, added two-factor authentication to everything, even told HR to lock my personal info behind a security code. I wasn't angry yet, just cautious. Then came the weekend that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning, early spring, and I was running errands when I got a notification from my bank. Unusual activity detected on your account. My stomach dropped. I opened the app, and there it was, a $5,000 transfer pending to an account I didn't recognize. I froze. Then I saw the name. Chase W. I felt my blood pressure spike. I hadn't spoken to him in weeks. I immediately called the bank and canceled the transfer before it cleared. They confirmed it had been initiated through online access. When I asked how that was possible, the rep said, it came from a device previously used for your account. And that's when it hit me. Months ago, during a family dinner, Chase had borrowed my laptop to look something up. He'd probably seen my password auto-filled, maybe even saved it. I'd changed it once since then, but not before he could have linked a device. I sat there in my car, shaking, not because of the money, but because it was him. My brother. The same brother whose Italy trip I had unknowingly funded. The same one who'd never once said thank you for years of handouts. I called him immediately. He answered on the second ring, casual as ever. Yo, what's up? You tried to transfer $5,000 from my account. There was a pause, followed by a laugh. Oh, that? Yeah, I was going to text you. It was just temporary. I needed to pay for something quick. You know I was good for it. I couldn't even speak for a second. You stole from me. Dude, don't make it sound so dramatic, he said. You've always helped out before. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal, I said, my voice trembling now. You went into my account without asking. You used my personal information. He scoffed. You're really blowing this up. Mom said you've been stressed lately. Maybe just take a breath, yeah? That sentence, the way he said it, that calm, patronizing tone, made something inside me snap. I realized in that moment that they didn't see me as a person anymore. I was a walking resource, a bank with emotions they didn't have to acknowledge. I'm done, I said, my voice flat. Don't ever contact me again. He laughed like I'd told a joke. Come on, bro, stop being weird. It's not like you're perfect either. You left us high and dry. I left because of this, I said. Because of exactly this. I hung up before he could respond, then blocked his number. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit in the car for several minutes. That night, I got an email from my mom. The subject line read, "We need to talk about Chase." Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was long, written in that manipulative tone she used whenever she wanted to guilt me into something. She wrote that Chase had been struggling, that the Italy trip hadn't gone as planned, that he made a mistake, but I shouldn't blow things out of proportion. The kicker came in the middle. You know how he looks up to you. You've always been his safety net, and deep down, you love that. Don't pretend you don't. I stared at that sentence until the words blurred. Then I deleted the email. But the betrayal didn't stop there. A few days later, my HR department contacted me again, this time about something far worse. Hey, Dax, my manager said cautiously on the call. We got a strange email about you from what looked like your personal address. It said you were resigning effective immediately and transferring your accounts to a family member. But it didn't sound like you. My heart dropped. That wasn't me, I said instantly. They forwarded it. It was from an address that looked almost identical to mine, one extra letter in the domain name. The email read, "Thank you for the opportunity. I'm stepping away to focus on family matters. My brother Chase will be taking over my client accounts for now." I felt sick. It was sophisticated, deliberate, and the fact that it mentioned Chase wasn't an accident. I spent the next 24 hours unraveling it. I found out the fake email had been created using my photo from LinkedIn, my old signature, and even my work title, all things easily found online. But whoever did it had gone a step further. They'd sent follow-ups to 2 of my clients before HR caught on. It could have tanked my credibility completely. When I confronted Chase about it, because who else could it be? He denied it, of course. "You think I'd waste time pretending to be you?" he said. "You're paranoid, man. You need help." Mom backed him up immediately. "Dax, you need to stop accusing your brother. He's been through enough." "He's been through enough?" I said, incredulous. "He tried to steal from me. He was desperate," she said. "Family helps family. You used to understand that." That was the moment I realized there was no reaching them. No apology, no confrontation, no logic would ever break through that wall of entitlement. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. In their eyes, I was the problem, for daring to pull away, for refusing to keep being used. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just went cold. "If you contact my job again," I said quietly, "I'll involve the police." Her voice cracked into outrage. "You'd really call the police on your family?" "Yes," I said, "on anyone who steals from me." I hung up. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, the only sound the quiet hum of the fridge. I felt hollow, not even angry, just done. You can only get betrayed so many times before it stops hurting and starts clarifying. I backed up every file on my laptop, changed all my passwords again, and locked down every account I had. But even as I did it, I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Because stealing money was one thing. Pretending to be me, trying to replace me, was another. And somewhere deep down, I knew they weren't finished. I just didn't realize how far they'd go next. When the next betrayal came, it wouldn't just cost me money. It would cost me something far more personal. And by then, I wouldn't be the same Dax they used to know. The weeks after the fake resignation email felt like living in a fog. I'd wake up every morning to silence that should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. It was hollow. Every ping from my phone made my chest tighten. I kept expecting another email, another crisis, another attempt to drag me back into their chaos. My apartment, once a place of relief, started feeling like a bunker. I stopped answering unknown numbers entirely. At one point, I even unplugged my landline after getting a string of voicemails that alternated between my mom crying and my dad demanding I fix the mess I made. According to them, Chase had lost access to some of his business accounts because of what I'd said to my bank, and somehow that was my fault too. They never once admitted what they'd done. In their version of the story, I was the one who'd betrayed them. But the real blow came a week later. I got home from work one evening, exhausted but trying to keep myself busy, laundry, cooking, anything that didn't involve thinking, when I saw a white envelope taped to my door. My name was written across the front in my mother's handwriting. I froze. For a second, I thought about throwing it away, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a printed letter and a photograph. The letter was long, 3 pages, and started with, "We still love you, even if you've lost your way." She went on about family, about forgiveness, about how I'd become cold and ungrateful, how money had poisoned my heart. She claimed they'd only ever acted out of love, that I was misremembering things, that Chase hadn't stolen anything. He'd borrowed from me because he thought I'd understand. And then came the real gut punch. If you can't be part of this family, we'll have to find a way to protect ourselves. Chase talked to a lawyer, and since the house and utilities are still under your name, we might need to take action to separate our finances legally. I hope it doesn't come to that. Please call us before it's too late. I felt my stomach twist. Then I looked at the photograph. It was an old picture of me at 18, graduation day, arm around Chase, both of us smiling like we actually liked each other. On the back, in her handwriting, was one sentence. "You used to be such a good brother." I sat down on the floor right there in the hallway and just stared at that photo for a long time. There's a special kind of pain that comes from realizing your family doesn't just misunderstand you. They've rewritten who you are in their minds. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same image, my family sitting together, eating dinner, laughing, while I sat outside, invisible. Not out of sight, but out of memory. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my friend Tyler. He'd been my roommate back in college, one of the few people who'd seen firsthand what my home life was like. When I told him everything, how Chase had stolen money, how they tried to impersonate me, how they were now threatening legal action, he was silent for a few seconds. "Dude," he finally said, "that's not family. That's a scam with better lighting." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Yeah, well, it's my scam." "Not anymore," he said. "You need to protect yourself. Talk to a lawyer, lock down your credit, document everything. And most importantly, don't go back there. Not even to talk. That's how they pull you in." He was right. I knew he was right. So I spent the next week doing exactly that. I gathered every document I could, bank statements, transfer logs, even old text messages. I met with a legal advisor through my job's benefits program. She listened patiently as I laid it all out, and when I was done, she said, "Dax, you need to formally remove your name from anything connected to their property. Otherwise, they can still use your information." So I started the process. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, every line that tied me to that house. I began cutting away piece by piece. But of course, they noticed. The first sign came when Dad called me from a new number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted closure, or maybe just confirmation that I wasn't crazy. The moment I said hello, his voice came through sharp. "What do you think you're doing?" "Protecting myself," I said. "From us," he barked. "We're your parents, Dax. Do you know how this looks? You're making us look like fools." "I'm not making you look like anything," I said. "You did that yourselves." There was a pause. Then his tone changed, lower, colder. "You think you're so much better than us because you make a little money. But don't forget who raised you." I didn't respond. Because the truth was, they didn't raise me. They just happened to be there while I raised myself. After that call, something inside me broke completely. Not in an explosive way, more like glass cracking under pressure. Quiet, irreversible. I started drifting through my days. Work became mechanical. Conversations felt rehearsed. My coworkers noticed the difference, but I brushed it off as stress. Nights were worse. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, going over every moment in my head, every red flag I'd ignored. And then came the day that pushed me to rock bottom. I got home from work to find my apartment door slightly open. For a second, I thought maybe I'd forgotten to close it properly that morning. But when I stepped inside, my stomach dropped. Someone had been there. Nothing was stolen, not exactly, but drawers had been opened, papers moved. My personal mail, which I kept in a small box, had been rifled through. On the counter sat a half-empty cup of coffee from the local cafe 2 blocks away, the same one Chase used to post about on Instagram. I knew it instantly. He'd been here. I stood there in the middle of the living room, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. He'd crossed a line even my parents hadn't. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about control. About reminding me that no matter how far I went, they could still reach me. I called the police, filed a report, changed my locks the same night. The officer was polite but detached, like this was just another line on his clipboard. "Any chance it's a family member?" he asked. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's the problem." After he left, I sat on the floor surrounded by my scattered things. For the first time, I cried. Not angry tears, just tired ones. The kind that come when you've been strong for too long. In that moment, I realized something that hit me harder than any betrayal ever could. They weren't going to stop because I wanted them to. They were only going to stop when it cost them to keep going. That's when the first spark of resolve flickered to life. I didn't act right away. I didn't scream, or post online, or try to confront them again. I went quiet, methodical. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, screenshots. I set up 2 hidden cameras inside my apartment, just in case they came back. I transferred my savings to a new account at a different bank. And then I started looking into exactly how much of their comfort was still tied to my name. The mortgage, I learned, was technically under my credit line, meaning I could freeze it. The utilities were still linked to my online payment portal, which I could revoke access to. Their internet plan, their car insurance, even some of Chase's phone bills, all traced back to accounts I had opened years ago to help the family. I realized something darkly poetic about it all. They'd built their life on my foundations. Every luxury they had, every safety net, they didn't just owe me money. They owed me stability. And now, I had the power to take it all back. But I didn't do it yet. Not immediately. Because revenge born in anger is messy. I didn't want messy. I wanted precise. Quiet. Final. So I waited. I kept working, kept saving, kept planning. On the surface, I looked calm again, someone who'd finally moved on. But underneath that calm, I was building something. Not just an exit, an ending. One that they wouldn't see coming until everything they'd leaned on collapsed beneath them. And when that day came, I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to gloat. I was just going to walk away, this time for good. But first, I had to watch them unravel a little longer. And they were about to give me the perfect opportunity. Because Chase, he wasn't done making mistakes. And the next one he made would open the door for me to end this whole story on my terms. When the dust finally settled after the break-in, I thought I'd be stuck in survival mode forever. But something shifted in me after that night. Fear had burned out completely. What replaced it was focus. Cold, steady focus. I stopped reacting to everything my family did and started building. Not revenge yet, just stability. I threw myself into work. My company was small but growing fast, a startup that specialized in network security. It felt poetic, in a way, that I spent my days protecting clients from the exact kind of invasion I'd just lived through. I started volunteering for extra projects, late-night code reviews, even helping troubleshoot client systems. I didn't care about overtime. I cared about control. Within 6 months, I'd earned 2 internal promotions. My boss, who used to barely remember my name, started calling me his anchor. The raise that came with it was significant enough to change everything. I upgraded to a larger apartment, furnished it exactly how I wanted, minimal, quiet, clean. Every purchase felt symbolic. The new laptop? Mine. The framed photo of me standing alone at a lake? Also mine. My world had finally stopped revolving around them. For a while, it felt too good to be real. I reconnected with people I'd drifted from, friends from college, coworkers who'd only ever known the quiet, exhausted version of me. They started inviting me to dinners, movie nights, weekend trips. I didn't say yes to everything, but when I did, I actually showed up. No, sorry, can't make it, because Mom needed money for a small emergency. One Friday, after a long week, I met Tyler again for coffee. He studied me for a minute and said, "You look different, like you finally exhaled." "Maybe I did," I said, smiling for real this time. He nodded. "Told you once you stopped feeding them, you'd grow." He was right, but he didn't know how much I'd grown. While my personal life settled, my professional one exploded. My name started circulating in the tech space, small conferences, LinkedIn mentions, even invitations to guest-write cybersecurity articles. I didn't think much of it until a recruiter reached out from a major firm. It was the kind of company I used to dream about, but never thought I'd touch. After 3 interviews, they offered me a salary that tripled what I was making when I'd left home. I accepted without hesitation. The first paycheck from that job didn't just feel like money. It felt like freedom printed on paper. I set up new savings accounts, started investing, even hired a financial advisor. For the first time, my future didn't feel fragile. It felt earned. But success has a way of drawing old ghosts back. The first sign came through social media. Chase had unblocked me, or maybe made a new account, and started liking my posts again. Photos of my workspace, my travels, my new apartment. At first, I ignored it. But then came the message request. "Bro, we should talk. I miss you." It was short, casual, and completely tone-deaf. Like none of the chaos had ever happened. I didn't reply. 2 days later, "Mom said you're doing well. She's proud of you." That one made me laugh out loud. Proud. The same woman who'd accused me of being poisoned by money? Still, I didn't respond. Weeks passed. I started consulting on the side, building small digital tools to automate cybersecurity reports. It started as a hobby, but quickly turned profitable. I named it Sentinel Flow, just a simple platform for small businesses. But to my surprise, it took off. Within a year, I had 3 part-time employees and a few $1,000s a month in recurring revenue. And that's when the old bitterness started to fade, not replaced by forgiveness, but by perspective. I realized they'd built their lives on dependency because it was easy. I'd built mine on survival because it was necessary. And now, that difference had turned into power. But the real turning point came at a tech conference. I'd been invited as a speaker to talk about data security for small startups. It wasn't a huge event, but it felt symbolic. Me, standing on a stage, talking about boundaries and protection. Midway through my talk, I looked out over the crowd and saw a face I didn't expect. Chase. He was sitting near the back, arms crossed, wearing that same smug expression he always wore when he thought he was being clever. For a second, I lost my train of thought. Then I caught myself, refocused, and finished my presentation. Afterward, he came up to me like we were old friends. "Man, that was impressive," he said, grinning. "You've really leveled up. What are you doing here?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Networking. Thought I'd check it out. Plus, I figured it's time we clear the air." "There's no air to clear," I said. "We're done, Chase." He leaned in slightly. "Come on, Dax. Don't be like that. We're brothers." "No," I said. "We're related." "That's not the same thing." For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. He just looked at me. Really looked, and for a flicker of a moment, I saw something like realization in his eyes. Maybe regret. Or maybe just confusion that his favorite target didn't bend anymore. He didn't push it. He just said, "Mom's not doing great, by the way. She keeps saying you're gonna regret walking away." I met his gaze. "She's been saying that my whole life." And I walked away. That night, I went back to my hotel room and opened my laptop. My company dashboard glowed on the screen, full of client updates and growth metrics. I thought about how far I'd come since that night. I packed my laptop and left. It hit me then. I didn't know them revenge. I didn't know them anything. But I also realized something else. They still owed me. Not money. Not apologies. But closure. And I wasn't going to ask for it. I was going to take it. A month later, something interesting happened. My old financial advisor called to ask about a mortgage release form he'd been CC'd on. Apparently, their house, was still registered under my credit. And since I'd improved my financial standing significantly, the bank had contacted me about requalification. That's when the idea started forming. If I legally separated myself from that mortgage, it would trigger a review of the household's financial eligibility, meaning the loan would revert entirely to them. And with Chase's unstable income and my parents' limited credit, they'd lose every subsidy and low-interest rate tied to my name. It wasn't sabotage. It was correction. But before doing anything, I made sure I was bulletproof. I spoke to lawyers, read every clause, made sure every action I took was by the book. And once everything was airtight, I filed the paperwork. 2 weeks later, I got an email confirming the mortgage transfer had been completed. I read it once, twice, 3 times, then exhaled the longest breath of my life. That night, I went out to celebrate. I didn't tell anyone what for. I just sat at a rooftop bar overlooking the city, a glass of bourbon in hand, watching the skyline pulse with life. I thought about the version of me that used to live in that house, quiet, obedient, waiting for scraps of approval. He was gone. In his place was someone unrecognizable, someone capable, independent. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving their world. I was thriving in mine. Still, I knew it wasn't over. I could feel it, the quiet before the next storm. My family had always been predictable that way. When they lost control, they didn't accept it. They schemed to get it back. And right now, they were about to find out what life looked like without my money propping it up. But what I didn't realize yet, what none of us did, was that they were already plotting something far bolder, far dumber, and far more public than anything they'd ever tried before. And when it came, it would make every betrayal before it looked small. Because this time, they weren't just going to lose my help. They were going to lose their reputation. About 3 months after I'd severed myself from the mortgage, I got a letter from the bank confirming the transfer had gone through and that all associated responsibilities were officially theirs. That same day, I got a text from Chase. "What did you do?" "The bank froze our account." I didn't reply, but I smiled, because that was just the start. For years, they'd built their comfort on the quiet assumption that I'd always be there, paying, fixing, bailing them out before the cracks showed. Now those cracks were widening into canyons. The mortgage had reset to a higher rate, the utilities defaulted to unpaid status, and Chase's credit had taken a nosedive since the fake loan stunt. The entire structure of their financial life was collapsing, and I hadn't lifted a single illegal finger. But I wasn't just sitting back and watching. I had a plan. See, my side project Sentinel Flow had grown faster than expected. We'd landed a partnership with a mid-sized cybersecurity firm that gave us exposure to government and corporate clients. That meant resources, data access, legal contacts, and, ironically, tools for digital tracing. I wasn't looking to spy on my family, but I was curious about something. During the months they'd been quiet, a strange rumor had started floating around in my old hometown circles, that I'd embezzled money from my parents, that I'd been cut off for stealing, that I was under investigation. It was absurd, but it spread fast. A few old family friends even unfollowed me online. When I finally traced the origin, I found a burner Facebook account that posted these stories using photos only my family had access to. Pictures of me as a teenager, old screenshots from family group chats, even one of me on my graduation day. There was only one person who could have had access to all that: Chase. It was stupid, reckless, and so obviously personal that it almost made me laugh. But instead of confronting him, I decided to turn it into something useful. I contacted an attorney friend through one of my new business partners. He specialized in defamation and identity protection. When I showed him the screenshots and explained the history, impersonation, unauthorized access, money theft, he looked at me like I'd just handed him a gold mine. "Dax," he said, leaning back in his chair, "if half of this is provable, you could bury them in court. Financial fraud, defamation, unauthorized use of private data. This isn't family drama anymore. It's criminal." But I didn't want a drawn-out lawsuit. I wanted something quieter and much more permanent. He helped me set up a comprehensive cease and desist package, backed by notarized evidence and a drafted police report ready to be filed if they so much as breathed in my direction again. Every photo, message, and document was time-stamped, cataloged, and legally sealed. The next time they tried to twist the truth, I'd have receipts sharper than a blade. But I didn't stop there. I also reached out to the mortgage company again, explaining the history of unauthorized access to my accounts. They launched an internal audit and, as a result, flagged the family's address for irregular payment activity. That meant every financial move they made from that address now required manual verification. No more automatic payments. No more using my old information to bypass checks. And then I waited. It took about 3 weeks before the fallout hit. Mom called first, voicemail this time, since I hadn't unblocked her number. Her voice was shrill and frantic. Dax, what did you do? The mortgage company is asking for documents we don't even have. They're saying your name's connected to an audit. This could ruin us. I just let it play. The next day, Chase sent an email, his last attempt at pretending to be the victim. You didn't have to go this far. You made your point, okay? We get it. But you're destroying our lives. Do you really hate us that much? I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied with one line. No, I just stopped letting you destroy mine. And then, for the first time, I blocked him completely. But fate wasn't done delivering irony yet. About a month later, my company Sentinel Flow got shortlisted for a Regional Business Innovation Award. It was the kind of event covered by local press, photos, interviews, all that. I didn't think much of it until I saw my parents' names in a familiar community Facebook thread under the article about my nomination. Mom had commented, "We're so proud of our son Dax. We always knew he'd make something of himself." The comments underneath were brutal. People they'd lied to for months were calling them out, linking screenshots of their earlier gossip, asking, "Weren't you just saying he stole from you?" The irony must have hit them like a freight train. Their reputation, the one they'd always protected more than their relationships, was collapsing in public view. I didn't have to lift a finger. The truth had a way of surfacing on its own once people stopped hearing my side, only through them. But my real revenge wasn't the public embarrassment. It was what came after. A month later, I was offered a relocation opportunity, a position overseeing our new cybersecurity division overseas. 6 figures, housing covered, travel included. The day I got the offer letter, I felt something inside me go completely still. That night, I packed the same laptop I'd packed the night I walked out of their house years ago. I stared at it for a moment, remembering how that decision had terrified me. Now it just felt right. Before leaving, I made one final move. Through my lawyer, I sent a certified letter to their address. A formal document stating that any attempt to use my name, likeness, or information would trigger immediate legal action, supported by evidence already registered with authorities. The letter also clarified that I was no longer financially or legally associated with them in any capacity. And at the bottom, I added one handwritten line. You taught me to appreciate the little things. Losing me was one of them. I mailed it the day before my flight. The next morning, as I sat at the airport gate waiting to board, I got one last text, an unsaved number, but I knew who it was. We got your letter. You didn't have to do this. I didn't reply. I just smiled, closed my phone, and walked toward the boarding line. When the plane lifted off the ground, I looked out the window and realized something simple but profound. Revenge wasn't about watching them burn. It was about finally feeling light enough to stop carrying the ashes. They'd built their lives around using me. I'd built mine around outgrowing them. And for the first time in my life, they couldn't touch a single part of it. The house they lived in, no longer mine. The money they spent, no longer mine. The person they controlled, gone. And somewhere below, as the clouds swallowed the skyline, I knew they were sitting in that same crumbling house, wondering how everything had fallen apart. The truth was, it didn't fall apart. I just stopped holding it up. But little did I know, there was one final twist waiting, a message that would come months later from someone I never expected, reopening the story I thought I'd already ended. 6 months after I left the country, my life felt almost unrecognizable. The air in the new city was different, crisper, cleaner, lighter. I rented a small apartment overlooking the sea, just 10 minutes from my company's new headquarters. My days were simple but full. Work, morning runs, cooking my own meals, and long evenings watching the sunset from my balcony. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact every time my phone buzzed. The nightmares about Chase breaking into my apartment had stopped. I'd started dating someone, Elena, a data analyst from work who understood the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from years of giving yourself away to people who never gave back. She never asked too many questions about my family, and I never volunteered more than I wanted to. I thought that chapter of my life was over. Until one morning, while I was reviewing reports with coffee in hand, I got an email from an old acquaintance back home. The subject line read, "You should see this." Attached was a link to a local news article. My stomach tightened as soon as I saw the headline. Local family faces foreclosure and fraud investigation after financial irregularities. There it was. My parents' house, my childhood home, in the background of a photo taken by a local journalist. The story detailed how the mortgage had defaulted, how payments had been flagged for unauthorized alterations, and how the residents were under investigation for potential misuse of financial documents. There was even a quote from a neighbor saying, "They always seemed well off." I guess things weren't as perfect as they looked. I scrolled down and saw the kicker, Chase's name. He'd apparently tried to refinance the property using my old information again. The system caught it instantly because of the audit I'd set in motion months earlier. The investigation revealed a pattern of manipulation and unauthorized access going back years. The article didn't mention me by name, but anyone who knew the family would understand what had happened. I didn't feel triumphant. Not right away. Mostly, I felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm levels everything, and all that's left is sunlight on debris. That evening, Elena noticed I was distant. "Bad day?" she asked softly. I showed her the article. She read it carefully, then looked up at me. "How do you feel?" I thought for a moment. Like justice doesn't always need an audience. She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's finally done." Maybe it was. A week later, I got a letter forwarded through my company's legal department. It was from my mother. I almost threw it out, but something made me open it. The handwriting was shaky this time, less polished, more desperate. "Dax, we've lost the house. Chase is in trouble. I don't know what to do. I wish things had been different. Your father doesn't speak much anymore. He says this is all you're doing, but I know deep down it isn't. I know we pushed you too hard. Maybe we just didn't know how to love you the way you needed. I'm sorry, truly. If you ever find it in your heart to forgive us, we'll be here." There was no return address, just her name. I sat there for a long time, staring at that letter. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was survival dressed up as remorse. But still, part of me felt a weight lift. Because for the first time, she'd admitted it. "We pushed you too hard." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Life moved forward, and I moved with it. The company expanded, my side business grew, and I found myself mentoring young programmers who reminded me of me. Quiet, reliable, overlooked. I told them something I wish someone had told me years ago. Don't let being needed make you forget your worth. Months later, Tyler visited me overseas. We sat by the water, catching up over drinks. He'd heard bits of the story through mutual friends and shook his head as I filled in the rest. "You really did it, huh?" he said, raising his glass. "You walked out of the fire and didn't look back." "Not exactly," I said. "I just stopped trying to put it out." He laughed. "So what happened to them? Your parents, Chase?" I shrugged. "The last I heard, they moved in with an aunt. The house was auctioned off. Chase tried to start some online business, but it didn't last. They're surviving, I guess. Do you ever think about talking to them again?" I took a long sip before answering. "No. I think about forgiving them sometimes, but I don't mistake that for wanting them back." He nodded, thoughtful. "You know, most people who go through something like that end up bitter. You came out calm." I smiled faintly. I was bitter for a long time. Then I realized bitterness means they still have space in your head. I evicted them. He laughed again, but softer this time. The night stretched on. The ocean breeze was cool, the city lights shimmering across the water. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about my parents without anger. I pictured the house, the kitchen where I'd once sat feeling invisible, the night I packed my laptop and left. It all felt like someone else's life now, a story I'd outgrown. Still, one last moment of closure came unexpectedly. One Sunday morning, while cleaning my inbox, I found a message in the other folder, an old Facebook message from Chase. It had been sent weeks earlier, before his account was deleted. "Hey Dax, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say I get it now. You were never the selfish one. I was. I thought you'd always be there to fix everything, but you were the only thing holding it together. When you left, it all fell apart, and at first I hated you for it. Now I think maybe that's what was supposed to happen. You didn't destroy our lives. You just stopped saving them. I don't know where we'll end up, but I hope you're happy. You deserve it." I sat there for a long while after reading that. No anger, no sadness, just a strange peace. Because finally, he'd seen the truth I'd carried alone for years. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. That night, I went for a walk along the shore. The water glowed under the moonlight, the waves soft and rhythmic. I thought about the journey, The years of being invisible, the betrayal, the loneliness, the slow climb back to myself. And I realized something that made me smile for real this time. Revenge hadn't rebuilt me. Peace had. Walking away hadn't been the punishment. It had been the cure. Somewhere across the ocean, in a small town with a foreclosed house, my family was finally learning to live without me. And somewhere here, under a sky full of stars, I was finally learning to live for me. I stopped at the edge of the water, letting the waves wash over my shoes. The air smelled of salt and freedom. I took a deep breath and said softly, to no one, to everyone, I'm done. And for the first time in my life, I meant it.